Welcome everyone, I'm Samson Omale in Jos, North Central Nigeria, and this is Africa Matters. This week we visit Togo, where lawmakers have approved a new constitution, shifting from a presidential to a parliamentary system of government. But opposition parties are against the move. We look at what it means for the country. Togo faces a severe political crisis as President Faure Gnassingbé seeks to prolong his family's 54-year rule, sparking nationwide protests for democratic reforms. Stemming from a history of autocratic governance under the Gnassingbé dynasty, Faure has faced accusation of electoral fraud and human rights abuses since taking power in 2005, intensifying public discontent. Opposition parties are calling for urgent, inclusive dialogue and democratic reforms to address grievances and ensure a peaceful future.
We have to fight simply because we are facing a coup d'etat, a coup de force. And it's not normal for us not to react to a coup d'etat perpetrated by someone whose sole aim is to remain in power forever.
We are taking part in the elections. For us, it's very clear. All our resources will be allocated to the electoral campaign, and the demonstrations will also contribute to the electoral campaign. So rest assured that we are not going to leave all the political field or the electoral campaign field to the government.
It is now unclear whether President Faure Gnassingbé's term in office could be renewed by lawmakers or the electorate, as Parliament is expected to review the controversial constitution reform. Let's take a deeper look.
President Gnassingbé was appointed by his father, the late President Eyadema Gnassingbé, as Minister of Mines and Communications. After his father died, President Gnassingbé was installed as president with support from the army. But he was forced to resign as president after just 3 weeks in office over questions as to his appointment. Just 2 months after his resignation, he was elected as president and was sworn in. He was re-elected in 2010, 2015 and 2020. Togo moved from a presidential to a parliamentary system through a voting parliament. The opposition protested the move, claiming the aim was to extend the term limit for the president.
Let's hear more now from Joe Anuga. He's a senior lecturer of political science at the University of Jos. He joins me from here in Jos, Nigeria. Now, the opposition accused President Gnassingbé of trying to extend his term in office with a new constitutional amendment. Now, how factual is this, and how will this impact on Togolese politics going forward?
It's factual, given the antecedents of Togolese politics and what we have known of the activities of his own father when he was in power. His father was in power from 1967 until he died in 2005. And the process by which his father brought him in to, not his father anymore, the process by which he was now brought in to replace his father, that process actually required an amendment of the constitution from the required age limit of 45 years down to 35 to accommodate Faure's ambitions to become president. So from these antecedents, it is easy to see why the opposition does not believe in what he's saying, that he's trying to sanitize the system by moving towards the parliamentary system. In that sense, yes, it's factual. The impact on Togolese politics is going to be negative, if you ask me, because all republics depend on their electoral systems for their strength and for their legitimacy of their governments. In this case now, once that trust is broken because one side is not playing fair, it makes the electoral process that much more difficult to trust. And in this sense, I think the effect is going to be negative.
Okay. Now, there are reports of protests and calls for the reversal of this new reform. Now, will you say the reform is the main cause of the political crisis, or there are other factors that are contributing to the current political crisis in Togo?
Well, yeah, to some extent, but the current reforms, as it were, are more like a trigger, a casus belli, as it were, just a reason for the thing to start. But the causes lie deeper. The causes lie deeper in the attempt to transplant political institutions from one cultural environment to another. The parliamentary system, the presidential systems, these are all institutions that were developed in a different culture. Transplanting them to Africa, it's gone through a lot of problems, and we can see that these current problems we're seeing is actually an attempt to is a recognition of the nature of the difficulties of this transplantation. In this sense, for instance, you discover that in Republican systems normally, the Constitution acts as the final law, and all the political players are supposed to defend its tenets. In this case, constitutional changes happen to accommodate the interest of one side, as it were. If you look at Togolese politics, if you look at it closely, you find out that right from the beginning, when it got independence, the regime of Sylvanus Olympio was unstable. Removed from office, by the time Eyadema emerges, you recognize a coalition of interests building around him that require him to be their mediator and no longer the constitution, as it were. So the constitution now exists to serve their own interests in ways that it cannot serve the wider public. So I think that is those are the deeper reasons. This is a manifestation of those reasons.
All right, now there are several demands by opposition parties and CSO groups. Now, what are those demands and how will they impact Togolese politics also going forward?
These demands center around the idea that the reforms should not go ahead. Number one. Number two, they insist that, look, there's already been a reason to doubt the sincerity of those who are pushing this process. Remember that at the end of the day, the constitutional amendment, the parliament itself that has voted on this reform is not representative of the wider population. In 2018, the election that brought this parliament in was boycotted by the opposition. So the opposition has very little voice in this current parliament. And part of the reasons that the opposition is up at arms now, if you are going to have to reform the constitution for any reason, if it's going to be in the interest of the wider country, then it requires you to observe that the representatives of the wider country are in the parliament where this is discussed. Properly speaking, I mean, in virtually any of the European countries or Western countries that have either presidential or parliamentary systems, this would be an expectation. But you see that in Togo, that expectation is ignored by those in power. So you can see that that's why these protests are going the way they are.
Very well said. Now, what roles are the international and even regional actors playing in either stabilizing or finding some solution to what we have right now in Togo?
I guess they are trying to hedge their bets before they take any step. ECOWAS has a protocol that already expects that in no democratic system should constitutions be changed 6 months to an election. Of course, they are having parliamentary elections by the 29th of this month already, less than 6 months. ECOWAS ought to respond and insist that this should be halted. Are we hearing that? It's kind of crickets for now. With regard to the influence of the Western world, you would think that France, the former colonial power, would have some influence in trying to mediate how this is playing out. But again, you must remember, these are political systems. These countries define themselves as sovereign. So it's going to be difficult for external bodies to actually effect the consensus, though it's possible. But as things stand now, I think much of the world and even the African institutions are playing a wait-and-see game.
Okay, so what are the potential implications of the political crisis in Togo to the West African region, especially when you begin to look at the economic factors that may result from this?
I think it's generally negative. For one, economies grow more effective, more faster. Development happens in leaps and bounds where there is political stability. Instability does not help economic development at all. Increasingly, we seem to see undemocratic practices spreading across the sub-region. So this, again, contributes to that perception. And to the extent that the perception of West Africa is as an undemocratic environment, I don't think anyone would expect political stability to exist in an environment that is undemocratic, because it doesn't factor in the interest of the wider population. And if this is the case, the economy of the whole sub-region can take a hit from something like this. I think it's all negative. I think the sub-region's economy can do better without things like this.
And are there lessons to be learned, especially for other countries within the sub-region, with what's happening with Togo at the moment?
I think there are lessons to be learned, of course. I think if we are able to find mechanisms to reduce the potential for conflict caused by things like this, a one-party parliament in a multi-party society, a parliament that comes into power as a result of the boycott of significant segments of the politically active parts of the population. Such parliaments should not have a business trying to change the constitution. Rather, the effort should be to bring in other people who have different interests from you or who doubt your own sincerity, to bring them in so people know that the interest that you are trying to serve with the power you have acquired is for the wider population. That's what I think would help. That's the lesson. If we can learn it from what is going on now, it will be a good one for the whole of the sub-region.
Okay. And now to Kenya. A year ago, news from a tranquil town called Malindi in Kenya shocked the country and the world when several mass graves were discovered in its Shakahola forest. The bodies were victims of starvation and strangulation and were all members of a cult run by a man known as Paul Mackenzie. Over 429 bodies were found, including 131 children. Alexandra Majala is there and brings us this update.
Malindi, a quiet coastal town, is a magnet for both local and international tourists. But the Shakahola massacre put it on the map after what has come to be known as one of the world's worst cult-related tragedies in recent history. Last year, April, police combed tens of thousands of acres of forest and they discovered hundreds of bodies.
Our
family lost 8 members, including my wife, my 2 sons. One had just completed the Marine course, their wives and their children. My son, who worked for the GSU, is still missing, but we have laid his wife to rest here. And one of my daughter-in-laws is also still missing, as well as one of my grandsons.
There are still hundreds of unidentified victims, and 34 bodies have matched DNA samples provided by family members and have been dispatched to relatives to be laid to rest. This is where Titus Ngonyo Gandhi has buried his family. The father and grandfather did not expect to precede his descendants in death. He's one of hundreds of families who are still coping with the aftermath of Shakahola, and as the country marks 1 year since the discovery, Kenyans are still in the dark as to how many bodies are still out there. Malindi Community Human Rights was the first group to report missing persons linked to the Shakahola massacre.
Gospel of hope. People nowadays are being sold the gospel of hope, but is that in the human rights world we call it religious extremism. It is on the high rise, religious extremism, because so many Kenyans, or in Africa, everybody has lost hope.
Meanwhile, the disgraced Mackenzie and 94 co-accused are facing charges in 4 different courts of law, ranging from 191 counts of the murder of children, 238 counts of manslaughter, as well as terrorism and the violation of children's rights.
There is no any guideline that you can get from the Kenyan Constitution. There is no written law in Kenya. There is only freedom of worship. So there is freedom of worship. And everything that is being preached, as long as that preacher is quoting verses from the Bible, now that is upon him how he is going to translate them, how he is going to preach to his followers.
According to some of his followers, Mackenzie is a former taxi driver in the coastal city of Mombasa who forbade cult members from sending their children to school, going to hospital when they were ill, as well as keeping jobs, branding such institutions as satanic. If convicted, the preacher is facing a life sentence. His next court date is looming, and so far, he and his co-accused have pleaded not guilty to all charges. Alexandria Majala, Africa Matters, Malindi, Kenya.
The Ghanaian government is in talks with its international bondholders to restructure over $13 billion of foreign bonds as part of a $3 billion IMF bailout package. The government is aiming to cut more than $10 billion from its debt repayment. But economists and Ghanaians say the debt restructuring program will only mean more hardship for the country's people. Rory Sika Mann reports.
In a suburb of the capital Accra, Grace Akole watches both her 15-year-old daughter and sister struggling with life-threatening end-stage renal failure. Each day presents a new struggle. They need 3 dialysis sessions a week, each costing $140 to sustain them until a possible future transplant. However, they have been unable to scrape the money together to fund a single session.
The cost per session is now too much. Now we cannot even afford just 1 session. It's sad. Sometimes their health deteriorates drastically, but until someone steps in to help, they can only struggle. Times are hard, and we can't keep relying on donors. All my money has gone into buying medicines.
Ghana is facing its worst economic crisis in generations that has plunged many Ghanaians into financial hardship. Despite an IMF bailout package, drastic cuts in public expenditure, one of the IMF conditions, have left some sectors of the economy struggling. And that's had an impact on the health sector, where inflation, high taxes, and the depreciation of the cedi have driven up the cost of health services, medicines, and other consumables. Food prices have also soared. Businesses are folding, leading to mass layoffs and pushing the unemployment rate to unprecedented levels. The government's freeze on public sector employment has affected many, including 39-year-old Salif Musa. 8 years after graduating with a degree in business administration, he has yet to secure any meaningful employment. He aids supporting his elderly parents and siblings with income from his motorcycle taxi business, which he says is very risky.
Sometimes when I'm coming to work, I panic. Why did I panic? Whether if I will go back home safely.
Ghanaians simply say times are hard.
It's the largest gold producer in Africa and the second largest cocoa manufacturer in West Africa, but heavily indebted with an economy on its knees, bringing untold hardship to the citizenry, who are blaming the government for excessive borrowing, mismanagement, reckless spending, and corruption.
Ghanaians are hopeful for easier living conditions with the IMF debt restructuring program, but economists warn that they may be in for further shocks.
That's cost to the Ghanaian, right? So we are talking about higher taxes, and if the government is unable to meet the program target, then it means that subsequent budget review and budget presentations will have to come out with additional measures to scale up revenue generation.
According to the central bank, Ghana ended the 2023 fiscal year with a public debt of $52.4 billion. Economists maintained that the already weak cedi will further plummet, leading to the closure of many businesses. Until the economy rebounds, there's nothing Ghanaians can do but face down the hardship and hope for the best. Rollin Sikamam, Africa Matters, Accra, Ghana.
One of the biggest challenges for Senegal's newly elected president, Bassirou Diomaye Faye, is to address economic challenges facing the country. One important development is the resumption of a ferry service that connects the capital to the south. It was stopped in June because of political tension, but now it's back and holds the promise of helping Senegal's economic revitalization. Martin Andrews reports.
After months of suspension due to political unrest, a vital lifeline between Senegal's capital Dakar and the southern city of Ziguinchor has been restored, bringing joy and relief to countless passengers who have endured the stoppage for nearly a year. The resumption marks the return of an essential maritime link that connects the rural Casamance region with the rest of the country.
I'm so moved that words fail me because this is my first time taking the boat from Dakar to Ziguinchor. So as the boat was parked for a few months, we are delighted, happy to be making this journey in complete safety and a peace of mind.
We were really deprived from our freedom, and now we have got it back. And it really allowed us to travel a lot, to leave Dakar to come to Ziguinchor, to at least meet our needs, including those of our parents.
The restart of the ferry service comes as new president Bassirou Diomaye Faye begins to address the issues facing the country.
The issue of the cost of living is of particular concern to me and has my full attention. In the coming days, strong measures will be taken in this direction, following consultations that I will undertake with the relevant stakeholders.
With ticket prices starting at $8.30, the ferry's operations promise to inject much-needed revenue into the local economy, supporting livelihoods and fostering economic growth throughout the region. Martin Andrews, Africa Matters.
Madagascar, the world's third largest island, is home to many plant and animal species found nowhere else on Earth. Nuzi Iranja is known as the Madagascar Turtle Island, where an endangered species of turtle lay their eggs, and inquisitive visitors will often mate. Ramisia Koda reports.
Every morning, Nuzi Iranja Island in Madagascar embraces dozens of visitors sailing toward the heart of the Indian Ocean. A sea lover, Tanguy Guillaume Deschamps, has been organizing sea outings for 13 years among bottlenose dolphins and turtle species on the island, which is home to an endangered turtle species.
Welcome aboard, everyone. We'll be sailing all morning towards Nosy Iranja. Nosy Iranja is about 45 kilometers from Nosy Bay, and on the way, we're going to try to look for dolphins and turtles.
Known as Madagascar's Turtle Island, it's the main nesting ground for green turtles. Each nest can hold up to 150 eggs, but few babies survive. Out of 1,000 eggs laid, only 3 can produce an adult turtle seen underwater.
So here we have a nest of green turtles that laid its eggs here on March 15. The eggs will hatch in 40 to 60 days. The baby turtles reach adulthood, then cross the beach, where they are first eaten by crabs, then eventually by birds. And as soon as they cross the water barrier, all the carnivores like barracudas, jacks, and sharks can make them their appetizer.
But it's the humans who are invariably their worst enemy. Visitors are supposed to follow strict rules to avoid disturbing the marine fauna. And to protect this endangered species, the association is focusing on educating children about the dangers of plastic.
If they don't know how these animals live, they'll do anything like throw away plastic bags.
Tourist activities may have harmed marine turtles, but they also do have a positive impact by helping to reduce poaching and allow an effective way of monitoring of nesting turtles on the island. Rumeysa Chodar, Africa Matters.
Rwandan fencing coach Patience Wamungu is creating opportunities in sport for disadvantaged children, and he is training them for free. Fencing isn't a popular sport in Rwanda, but Patience says he is optimistic. He says the future is bright and his students have a fighting chance of success. Brenda Radido reports.
It's a busy day at the Gisimba Memorial Center in Kigali, Rwanda. Patience Wamungu is putting students through their paces and giving them tips on how to make sure that they enjoy the fencing classes while learning. He is one of the only 4 coaches in the country.
I first got to learn about the sport of fencing when I met a young American here in Kigali who was a fencer. I then got an opportunity to go to Senegal to further my knowledge of fencing.
Wearing the sporting gear, the fencers take turn trying to score against each other. The majority of the students are orphans, refugees, and underprivileged children.
Many people fear this game because they think it's just about knives and swords, but it's a very clean game, and there are many untapped career opportunities in fencing. You can not only be a player, but you can also be a referee, a coach, or even the head of the nation's federation. And then in addition, there's the allure of winning medals for your country.
Fencing is a good game and I like it. It can take me places and I will make money and pay my school fees.
Established over 75 years ago, this training center has been a safe haven and social center for children who are victims of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis. The Gisimba Center's history and work is what drew Patience to volunteer here.
After the genocide, this center was instrumental in empowering the orphans and helping them learn the sport. So I thought to myself, why not volunteer here and share my knowledge with children of this institution that gave them so much?
I like this fencing because it makes me happy, and I wish to go to America, to win for my country, Rwanda.
The social center is dedicated to the defense and protection of the rights of the child population in Rwanda, mostly on the creation of after-school programs. Brenda Radido, Africa Matters.
And this week, we explore Honsoville in Gabon. It is the 3rd largest city in the country and best known for its mining industry. That's our show for this week. Let us know what you think about the stories you've seen. Share your ideas and feedback. You can find us on X and on YouTube by searching TRT World Africa Matters. Thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Samson Omale, in Jos, North Central Nigeria.